Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on this exciting webinar about looping within ConnectWise RMM. This is script looping. There's going to be a little bit of an explanation about how I got to this topic, and hopefully that'll resonate with some of you. A little bit more about me. My name is Scott McQueenie, and I'm a software training consultant. I literally just celebrated my 13-year anniversary here at ConnectWise. I have been a software training consultant the entire time. Coincidentally, that was my 1-year wedding anniversary. Totally accidental that I got married on my work anniversary, but it made it really easy to remember my wedding anniversary. Just saying. I'm obsessed with partner success. Let me try to explain what I mean by that. Early on in sort of the infancy of ConnectWise RMM, a partner was trying to accomplish this thing. And pretty much my entire background while I've been working in the education department here at ConnectWise, I started back when I was actually hired by LabTech, and I was training on a product called LabTech at that time, now lovingly known as Automate. Anytime a partner was trying to figure out how to do something, those are the kind of things that myself and my colleagues on my team always geek out about. As a matter of fact, some of them end up being webinar content. We're like, wow, we put our heads together on this, and it was kind of convoluted, but we figured out a solution, so let's make a webinar for that. Well, early on in RMM, I was on a partner success call with somebody from the partner success team and a partner. They were trying to accomplish this thing with functionality that was not yet in RMM. I'm happy to report that functionality is now available within RMM. In particular, what I was talking about was custom fields. In the initial iteration of RMM, we only had custom fields on the device. Now we can have custom fields on a company or site. But they were trying to accomplish something. And as I've worked on Automate and trained on Automate for so many years, I knew quickly and easily how I would accomplish that with Automate. For any of you familiar with it, I would be using extra data fields. Well, since I didn't have extra data fields available for the company and site in RMM, I spent some time and I came up with this crazy convoluted workaround. I took screenshots, I sent it to them, and technically it was going to solve for what they need. Was it going to be kind of a pain and convoluted to configure it? Yeah. But it was going to allow them to deliver the automated solution they were looking for. That's the kind of thing I like to be able to do, to come up with something cool, to come up with a workaround, to just educate somebody who maybe has never tried to do this thing within the product. Cool. If I know a way to do it, let me show you. If I don't know a way to do it, I'll ask other people and see if we can come up with a solution, and then I'll show you that. I want to be able to make you guys successful using the product because that's a part of my job that I really love. Anytime I have a moment with a partner who's like, oh, cool, now I get it. That's so fun. I love being able to share that moment and then have them start using the product better. And that just spreads and gets everybody more in using the product. I love that. I am an avid golfer. Love playing golf. I've played pretty much my whole life. I like watching golf. Ironically, not attending live golf tournaments as much. Unfortunately for me, avidity does not translate to acumen. I love it, but I stink. One thing I don't stink at is making dad jokes and speaking with silly accents. Enough about me. Let's talk about today's session. The agenda for this is going to start with finding a variable in the haystack and then various looping examples. And I mentioned on the first slide there, the title slide, I would kind of try to explain how we came up with this as a topic. Like I said, I've been training on Automate back when it was LabTech for 13 years now. And Automate didn't have an actual script looping functionality. It just so happened that in my role as a trainer in Automate, I started sort of becoming more and more familiar with the scripting engine. I ended up developing 3 levels of scripting education assets to try to get more and more advanced to serve the needs of our partners as they were growing and growing with their experience. I wanted them to be able to make more complex scripts, and I was learning more complex script functionality. So there's a way to do looping. There's more than one way to do looping in an Automate script, but we didn't have a built-in function for it. So as I was paying attention to new product releases and things coming down the pike for RMM, when I saw that we were adding a script looping function, I'm like, cool, that's it. We need to make a webinar for this. I'm so jazzed about that. I wish Automate had it. I certainly have learned other ways to do it in Automate, but I love the fact that we're having a built-in script loop function. So I got excited about that, and that's how this particular webinar came to be. And hopefully, after I show you a couple different examples of this, you're going to be like, oh man, he's right. That's pretty awesome. All right, let's start off with finding a variable in a haystack here, okay? It's like, I know the data's in there, but where? Kitty can feel your pain. She's trying to write a script in RMM, but she hasn't been able to put her finger on exactly where that data lives in the RMM database. She knows it's in there. You can go to the devices screen and see the information she's looking for, but she doesn't really know the name of the variable to be able to use it and put it into her script. Let's see if we can fix that for her. Get her a little bit familiar with how to find those sneaky variables, right? She's trying to find out what the operating system is. Once she's able to find the operating system, she's going to be able to incorporate that into her script. But she doesn't know where that's stored in the RMM database, so we're going to see if we can figure that out. The way we're going to start is by using a script function called setPredefinedVariable. There it is on the screen there. I've given it a name of OS. I'm just trying to populate the operating system here. You can see my choices there are system variable or custom field. So I'm using system variable. So this is going to give me access to populate the variable we're creating. We're creating it with the name of OS with something from that list there, starting with endpoint at the top. What we're going to do is we're going to start by expanding endpoint, right? Endpoint was just the first thing at the top of the list. We're going to expand that. Next up, we're going to expand asset. I'm just digging further into this list to try to figure out where operating system lives. If I can figure out where operating system lives, now I'm going to be able to incorporate it into a script, all right? After we expand asset, we're expanding OS. And as you see how OS expands, notice how I've got several already in the list below it. So there are several, like, you could call them maybe child variables that are in the OS category. I'm not sure which one of these is actually going to be what I'm looking for, which is the OS. So what we're going to do is we're going to select OS. That's going to take everything in that OS category, and it's going to populate it into my variable, the variable that I have named OS. After that, we're going to click on that save button. Created my script function, call it OS, drill down and expand, figure out what we want to include in this variable. We're selecting everything in that OS level of hierarchy of my variables in there. So now we've got the variable populated. Next up is to write it to the script log. Not a very complex script function there, is it? The function, as you can see, is called ScriptLog. And then what do you want to write in there? Well, in my previous step, we defined a variable. We called that variable OS. So anytime within the script that you want to refer to that variable, you just put in the name of that variable surrounded by the @ signs. What do I want to write to the script log? @OS @ means everything that's contained in the OS variable at this time. Easy peasy. So now we've populated the variable. What do we want? Everything related to OS. Cool. Now how do I get visibility to it? Write it to the script log. Cool. Thanks for the idea. Next, we run the script on an endpoint. We need to capture that piece of information. So let's run it on an endpoint. Then we go to the devices screen. We look for that particular script that we ran. So we've gone to the devices screen, and now we're on the automation tab. And you can see my cleverly named script there with the box around it. Find the variable. Once you click on that one, the script log pops up over there on the right. That is the script log that we populated by running that simple two-step script. Populate the variable, write it to the script log. What is all this mess then, right? I mean, I know we selected everything in the OS hierarchy in the variable list, but that's a bunch of junk, and I don't know how to read it. So what we're going to do is we're going to select it all there, and we're going to copy it. I just selected everything after that colon, right? Select everything from my results. The results there are the contents of my OS variable. When I've selected it all from the script log and copied it, what we're going to do next is we're going to see if we can clear this up. Can I get this in a usable format where I can understand it and see which one of these pieces of data is actually what I'm looking for? As I was going through this, I was working with a couple of bright and extremely helpful dudes. They were helping me figure out how to navigate through the script engine and troubleshoot my script and stuff like this. And they introduced me to this page. All of you are, I'm sure, are familiar with the way ConnectWise brands, well, not brands, but the naming convention for all of our friendly URLs. All of our URLs are something like connectwise.com/home, right? I'm going to be really embarrassed if this isn't the URL to home, but you get my point. We try to make our URLs really simple. Notice how this one does not begin with connectwise.com. This is not a ConnectWise site. This is not in any way affiliated with ConnectWise. But as I was working with the PM and this really fantastic bro of mine on the partner success team, we went through this page and they introduced me to the functionality here. And what you do is you paste the gobbledygook, meaning the stuff I copied from that script log, in the left-hand window. Then down there at the bottom, you click the beautify button and look what it does for the content over on that right-hand page. I'm sorry, the right-hand pane, right? Here's all the stuff in the left that I couldn't make heads or tails of, but when I paste it in here and beautify it over on the right, now I've got a usable, readable list of what all those variables were and what is the data value for that particular object. Look at that. Now I can see product within the OS category of variables is the operating system name. There you go. Eureka. It worked. Yeah, this really was a Eureka moment for me, folks. I'm telling you. I was really beating my head against the wall trying to figure this out. And it only got harder from here. Now that Kitty's able to find where she can grab the piece of operating system, grab that piece of information from the database, now she'll be able to make a script to react dynamically depending on the flavor of operating system that was detected on the agent we're running it against. Now look here at the top. My first function there at the very top, set my predefined variable. I gave it the name of OS just like I had before. But whereas in the first example, when we're trying to find which one to put in there, we threw everything in there. Well, in the second example, we're not doing it that way because now I know what product contains the piece of information I'm actually looking for. So I grab just product, and that's what's loaded into my variable. After that, you can see I just have 3 distinct if-then statements that I used as an example because what Kitty was trying to do was trying to have the script react dynamically once we had pulled in the OS and react dynamically to which OS is going to cause call a different part of the script, right? So the first one, if it contains server 2016, and then I just said, we're going to run some PowerShell script that pertains to that flavor of the operating system, and maybe I'm going to write to the script log. Jump down to the next section, contains server 2022. Jump down to the next section, contains 10 Pro for like Windows 10 Pro. This allows me to grab a piece of information because now I've identified the variable. I've learned how to identify variables by writing to a script log and taking them out to a page where I can make sense of the results. Now, when I learn the variable I want to put in there, I can use if statements like this, have it go through hoops and do whatever I need it to do. Really fantastic way to learn where your variables are and then incorporate them into your script intelligently to make the script work for you. So once we found out what the variables are, next we're ready to keep you in the loop. There's some pretty cool stuff in here, I have to admit. In this scenario, there's been an exploitation detected from Microsoft Edge, and a machine running Edge needs to be updated to the latest version forthwith. We're going to start out by writing a little scripty script. I cleverly named it AAA Microsoft Edge 0-day example. One of my coworkers in our group chat says, "Hey, have any of you guys seen all these scripts that begin with AAA?" I'm like, Yeah. That's what I've been doing when I'm developing the script, dude. So they're at the top of the list. Makes it easier for me to find. Yeah, there's a method to the madness. This was before I learned that I could filter on created by and choose me. Don't worry about it. AA still works just fine. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to start off by setting that predefined variable. We populated the predefined variable, and take a look at that. I'm calling my variable software list. And that's going back to my early example when we're setting predefined variable, we just chose OS. Well, this one, I named it software list because I'm looking to pull software information. And there's something else I want to share with you while I've got this particular screen up. In this particular example, software list is going to pull back a list of installed software. I think it's literally called installed softwares is the name of the variable category. You remember in my variable category for OS, it was called OS and there was a bunch of listings within there. Well, I think this category was called install softwares. But what's going to do is it's going to populate this variable with that information. When my colleague and I, the man who was so instrumental in helping me develop this script, he and I were building this and he was helping me troubleshoot it. And it wasn't working for me. And I'm banging my head against the wall. I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing wrong. How come I'm not getting the data I'm looking for? He had a different script, but he was able to get his script to loop successfully. And we were not able to figure it out. Now, I was with LabTech before the script debugger got added to automate. And there isn't currently a debugger in RMM. So the way you do any debugging of your script is after each step, ask yourself, is there a way I can test to see if that script step just worked? If there is, write it to the script log. So we were trying to figure out what was going on with my script. Why was it not working? Why would it not loop through and do what I expected it to do? I was running it against machines that I knew had Edge installed. So it should have been working. So we looked at the difference between his script and my script. When I started making my script in this predefined variable that I was calling software list, I was only pulling the name because I had already determined, kind of in a similar example, like we did with OS, I had already determined where in that installed software's category or hierarchy of variables where the name lived, and it was in the field cleverly named name. So I'm like, I'm just going to pull that in. I didn't care what the version was. My example wasn't driven off a version. I mean, maybe it could be, right? Maybe the exploitation is if they have this version, so you could make it a more intelligent solution. But I was only going for an example of I need to find Edge, download and install the latest. So I just cared about name, but it wasn't working. So we inserted a ScriptLog step immediately after that variable set step you see right there. And at that time, my software list only included name. And it wasn't populating my script. Well, it wasn't populating my variable. So this was cool. My troubleshooting worked. I knew that the problem was with my variable set predefined variable step, but where? In my previous example with the OS one, it worked. Why wasn't this one? And so we looked at the script that my colleague was making and the one he'd already made and that was already successfully looping for him. He was pulling in more than one item from the variable list when he populated his predefined variable in that top step. I was only pulling name. So he's like, man, I'm pulling in more than one item. Just as a shot in the dark, add something else to the list and see if it works. And of course it did. That's the way it worked for him. That's the way it worked for me. I don't know if that's a feature as designed, if it's a bug. I shared those results with the PM, but I'm just letting you know if you run into this and you're not getting it to pull in what you're looking for, maybe consider adding more than one value for setting your predefined variable to see if that gets it to work for you. I hope, well, it should, because it did for him and it did for me. And hopefully that will save you some of the pain of making a script that's supposed to loop and you only put one thing in there and it's not working. You're like, that was it for me. I added another thing, started working perfectly. So my first step was setting my predefined variable, calling it software list, pulling in those two pieces of data. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a loop. This allows our script to iterate through an array of data. Any piece of data that's going to contain an array. I don't know if this is oversharing, but one particular field we were talking about is listed in the database as an array. I think the one I'm talking about here, which is installed softwares, I think might have been classified in the database as a list, not an array. I will tell you, it worked for me. So you don't have to be hung up on knowing in the back end that it has to be classified as an array in the database. Mine was a list and it 100% worked. So it's just something to keep in mind. But this is how you add a loop. In the add logic dropdown, so you can add a row to your script or you can add logic. So I chose add logic, and this is where we put the loop function. Oh, I just hit the wrong button. There we go. In the loop, we're referencing the variable name in the first step. So the variable name I set in there was software list. And anytime you're using the variable name in your script, you reference it surrounding it by the @ signs. At, software list, at. Couple things. No spaces, and it didn't let me use, I think I tried an underscore. Didn't let me use additional characters either, special characters. Another thing, I was struggling and not getting the script to work for me, because what I learned is in this loop step right here, what you see at the bottom, for each in is the variable we just set at the top, at software list at. I do type it exactly the way it's in there. So if I put a camel case in the variable name when I set the variable, I reference it as camel case here in the loop. Well, one of the things I was doing wrong was in this part of my initial line of the loop there, I was saying for each in at software list at, I was doing as software list. Well, you can't do that. You can't use the same name. It's already in use. I saw that, and that was one of the errors I got in the script log, as it wasn't working for me. So it's another thing to remember. When you're going to the loop here, you're telling it where you want to search through the variable you've already populated, and then what do you want to search as. That as name is important. It can't be the same. And throughout the whole loop now, we're going to reference it as the thing we put in the as field, okay? Can't be the same, and we've got to use that for the remainder of the loop. All right, next we're adding some IfThen logic to determine if Microsoft Edge is installed. Pretty straightforward. This is where I'm just going through my loop, and we're looking for the value in the variable that we pulled in. So remember, in the as, I called it as software. I typed it lowercase in that screen. So I'm looking in, because it's inside the loop, so I have to reference the as value. As lowercase software. What did I pull in there? Remember, I pulled two things because it wouldn't let me pull one. Version and name. Well, name is the one that I knew I was looking for. So I'm looking for the name to contain Edge. Pretty straightforward. Next, script log. I'm documenting. Cool. We found Microsoft Edge. So if it finds something up at the top, then go to the next line, which is script log. We found it. Then we're going to the next step. And that's where the magic happens. So you can see at the top, if it contains Edge, script log. Next is my Powershell function. Now, this is where I decided I wanted to make a PowerShell for this. And I will tell you, I've never actually written a PowerShell, but I did a quick Google of, can you make a PowerShell script to download and install the latest version of Edge? The answer was yes. The answer was much longer than yes, but I didn't really pay attention to the rest of it. But I wanted to take this opportunity to show any of you who might be at all like me and not capable of writing a PowerShell script and not particularly interested in learning a new scripting language, maybe I can use AI for this. So for my PowerShell script function, notice I've got the nifty button at the top to use generative AI assist for script creation. Generate a PowerShell script that downloads and installs the latest version of Microsoft Edge. That's all I typed in there. I told it to generate it. That's what it output. Pretty cool. That is just, this is what I'm looking for. Pop it in there. You can see it's got a URL where it's going to download it from. You can see it's got the output where it's going to store it. That's what it created. If I click on copy to script editor, then it puts it right there in that PowerShell script editor field. One thing I'd like to kind of mention to you guys, anytime you're using our AI features in here, I know you can use them in other products as well. As I was at one of our user group events in Seattle not long ago, the conversation, of course, turned to AI because it's powerful and popular and becoming more prevalent, and people need to know how to use it and need to know how to use it well and properly. One of the things that I thought was fantastic that came out of the conversation is AI is great for a first draft. One of the hardest things when you're trying to write a script, and I've written a lot of scripts in Automate, one of the hardest things is staring at a blank canvas and you get writer's block. I don't even know where to start. I get kind of, So using something like AI, dump in that generated PowerShell script, dump in there what you're looking for and generate it. Now you've got your first draft. Okay, let me go run that. Do I like it? Let me parse it through a page that analyzes PowerShell code. Let me say, oh, I don't really want to put it in cedge installer.exe. I'll choose a different directory. Just using the AI to get that first draft can save you a tremendous amount of time. Then you tweak it a little bit, and then you got to click the checkbox. The above script contains blah, blah, blah. I have reviewed and verified that it's ready to use. But that, to me, is much faster than starting from scratch and trying to write my own PowerShell script to do this. Part of the reason I chose PowerShell as the solution in this script is to be able to show you how to use the AI functionality for this. We also have AI in Automate for, Automate, listen to me. I can also use AI Assist in script creation in the RMM script engine for command prompt scripts, and I think Bash. By the way, I can use AI in Automate. I think right now that's through the web console. We actually have a whole webinar that just took place about that. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go to our video library and look for our AI webinar on that content. But this is a really quick and easy way to use the cool functionality of have AI Assist. I didn't have to start from scratch writing this script. And I didn't have to not use PowerShell, which means I've got to write a script or write some steps that download the installer, run it. It could have been more time consuming. Being able to use AI to do it, I think, is just a really neat functionality. And that's it. This is now going to find a machine. If it contains Edge in the software variable, we're going to document that to the ScriptLog, and we're going to run PowerShell to download and install the latest version of Edge. Quick and easy fix to fix any machine that's been exposed to this vulnerability for Edge. All right, next up. This particular one is all about keeping an eye on those users. Of course, these days, you really got to be mindful of security. One important way is keep an eye on local user accounts. Are there any local user accounts on my devices that are administrators whom should not be? Let's see if we can do something about that. This one's really cool. A little bit more steps in it, but it incorporates some functionality I really want to make sure you're familiar with and comfortable with. And again, we're introducing you to looping, taking some action based on what we find in there, setting the variable, working and iterating through the contents of the variable. So really cool functionality in here to make sure we don't have any accounts on these machines that are administrators that should not be. Right at the very top, we're setting my predefined variable. This one's looking for users, so we cleverly named the variable user info list. The two things from the list of user variable pieces that we pulled in here are the username and the user type. Pretty straightforward. Just like we did with the previous one for Microsoft Edge, I had a couple pieces of data pulled into my variable that I named software list. Similar situation. User information and user info list. Pull in my variable. Pretty straightforward. Next, we're starting the loop. Once again, remember that we have to reference the variable we created on the top step. Well, you can see we are. On the top step, we created user info list. Don't forget, for the remainder of the script, you reference that with at variable name, in this case, user info list. So in my loop, what am I looping through? For each in at user info list at, and then we're going to reference it as. Remember, it's got to be something different. Learn from my pain. All right, I tried making it the same. It didn't work. We don't need to talk about how long I went through that pain. Let's just move on. But we found out you can't make them the same. So I just called the as value user info. We're going to loop through there with user info. Now we're going to have a fancy sequence of embedded if-then and if-then else statements that take place after I've started my loop. We missed the button. There we go. All right. First up, anytime we're going through the loop, we have to tell it how we want to search the contents of the variable we defined. Once again, remember, in the loop, I'm always searching using that as value, okay? So throughout my if-then and my if-then else section, we'll refer to the variable as at user info at. In the loop, it's always what I defined in that first step of the loop in my as value. You're still surrounded by the at signs, but now anything in this if-then else in the loop section, we reference the as value surrounded by my at signs. Okay. What I'm doing here is I'm pulling in user data. So run this against the device, pull in local users. Then we're going to see, is the account type administrator? That's pretty straightforward. If the account type is administrator, then we're going to move down to that embedded section of if, then, else right below it. If not, we're going straight to the end if. I'm only concerned in this script with trying to find accounts that have an account type as administrator. If it's not an administrator, it's not one that concerns me. I'm just going to move on. But if it is an administrator, that's when we get now into my nested if then else section where the script is actually going to take some action for me. So we're going to take the steps if we determine it's an administrator. And one of the first things we're going to do here is find out if it's one of my known good accounts. There are supposed to be some administrator accounts on the machine. So if it's one of these, I don't want to do anything. But if it's not one of these, then we're going to take action. So that's how I set that up. This is just an if statement where I chose value. Notice how I'm using the at value from the as field when I set up my loop. I called it user info, at user info. What part of that? The username. And I'm looking for the 3 known good administrator accounts that were on my machine. Remote support and administrator were common accounts for all the ones I had on my machines. David A. is one of my colleagues on my team. He made himself an account. And he also needs to be an administrator. Notice the layout of this if then else statement, okay? If it's one of these 3, then nothing. How do you determine the nothing? Because there's an add row button right there. There isn't a row right below that if statement. So the then doesn't have anywhere to go to. If it's one of these 3, then nothing. We're good. Else. Notice the else section there. The else section is where we're taking some action. We found accounts that are administrators, but they're not one of the 3 known good ones. So we need to log this and fix the problem. So these are the steps that happen right after that one step with the 3 values where I'm checking to see, is it one of my 3 known good accounts? Okay, it's not. So the else section is where we jump to. You can see my first function there is a ScriptLog. And I'm using the variable reference for what was found. Once again, still referencing the as value at user info. And within that variable, the name, username. And I also put the next value, user type. So I'm setting here, this account and type was set as administrator account type, and it should not be. I've written to the log that we've identified the problem. Next, you can see the function we're using is modify local user. Now, of course, this could have been done by PowerShell, but it just so happens the RMM script engine has in here a function called modify local user. So I opened it up and looked at the parameters. What username do I want to use? Easy enough. I used it just in the step above. I used it earlier when I was trying to determine if it was one of my 3 known good ones. At user info, and then the username. So I'm modifying a local user. Which one? This one that's currently stored in my variable. Notice that drop down there for type. Administrator is one of the choices in that drop down, but that's exactly the problem. It is an administrator and it should not be. So what I'll do is I'll select users right there in the drop down. And what that's going to do is going to set the type. So which user? The one I currently have referenced in the variable. Set the type to users and check the checkbox active means it's an active user. I'm not necessarily trying to deactivate the account. It just should not be an administrator. I ran this against machines or a machine in my environment that had a user account that was an administrator that should not be. I ran this script. It worked and it did exactly what it was supposed to. I was actually connected to the machine via Screen Connect. I had the user screen opened up. I ran the script in RMM. I waited to see when the script had finished and it was successful. I backed out of the screen with users in Windows as I was connected in via Screen Connect, went back into the screen, and sure enough, it had changed the account type on the fly. The account that was in there that was an administrator that should not have been was no longer an administrator. It was just set to a regular user. So I could have done this one with PowerShell, but I chose to try the built-in user function, honestly, because it was much easier, and it worked on the first try right out of the box. That is our nifty script to pull in user information. Find out if they're administrators. Are they one of our 3 known good ones? If they are, cool. If not, document to the script log. Use the built-in function to modify user function, modify local user, send it to a user type, and that finishes fixing the problem. Now you can see all that's within my loop. So my variable is going to contain every user that it had found. And by using the loop, it's going to iterate through one user at a time and go through the loop check and take the appropriate action for each value in that array of users that it found on the device. That is the end-to-end solution right there for find local administrators. If they're not one that should be an administrator, make them not administrators. Use this as script looping. It's pretty straightforward and cool. And improve security in your environment and for machines you're charged with managing. All right, let's break it down for some key takeaways for you. First and foremost, figure out what data to put in your variables. I don't really have a good insight to go look in RMM and find out where in the database this piece of data lives. I didn't know that the product field contained the name of the operating system within the OS variables. Although it would seem logical to me to assume the software name would cleverly live in the name field with installed softwares. Based on my experience with OS products, I knew you can't guarantee it being intuitive. So taking the steps to capture your variables, run them through something like that Beautify page, it's going to pay off and you're going to be able to find out exactly the piece of data you're looking for. Write to the ScriptLog early and often. Again, my script was not working after the first step. So I had to make the second step a ScriptLog to capture, in my case, nothing because it didn't work. But anytime you're trying to figure out where it's not working, put a ScriptLog function in there. I told you before, I did get an error when I was using that loop function and I was putting in @UserInfoList, which is what I named the variable as, and I just kept the same thing, UserInfoList. That's where I got the error. The reason I got the error, because I looked in the script log. Write to the script log early and often. Ask yourself, can I test this? Cool. Let me test it in the next step and write the results to the script log. As you get better, you won't always have to do that. You'll have familiarity with how this function works and what it's looking for. Then when you start adding new functions, well, you'll probably start script logging after those. Especially as of right now, when we currently do not have a debugger in RMM, the script log is your friend. Use script looping to iterate through any array. And again, one of the ones I was working with, I think software actually, was technically considered a list, but it still worked. But use looping to iterate through that type of array or list of data and take action. That's a fantastic way to have a script attempt repeated actions over and over again until it gets to the end of that set of data without you having to code in logic to do all that. Just use the loop function. It will loop through you. It's fantastic. All right. What sort of questions you guys got for me? Don't be shy. I'm looking in here. I'm seeing some comments, some beautiful people saying lovely things about me. I appreciate you all. Thank you so much. Any questions about the content for me? Anything you got for me? Don't be shy now. Oh, I do see something coming in here. When referencing a set variable, Do you still reference as a normal PowerShell variable within the script? Can you expand on that for me a little bit, please? I'm afraid I don't quite follow you. When I'm referencing the variable I created, I reference at surrounding the variable name. If I understand, maybe you're asking within the PowerShell, can I reference the same way? If that's what you're asking, yes. If I want to reference a piece of data that's already been populated and identified within my script by the variables I set, so it would be at userinfo:\name at, I can put that inside my PowerShell script and it will take action on exactly that and respect the variable. Okay, I see your example. So I believe you can actually still just reference it the way we reference it in our script in the PowerShell script function there. So in the function where you're writing PowerShell script, you should be able to use just that at userinfo:\name at, and it'll push it right into that PowerShell script. I know that works. Actually, we've tested it. A little shameless plug as well for you guys. We would love to see you at our user groups. If any of you haven't been to our user groups, I can't recommend it enough. First of all, you're going to get fantastic content on stuff like this and other areas of our product, from security to BMS. Tons of fantastic, useful information about running your business or products. And you're also going to get leadership updates that are going to kind of clue you in on where ConnectWise is and where we are in our current vision and where we're headed. But most importantly, you're going to get quality networking time. Some of that comes in the form of running into someone like me or some of my other SMEs on the security or the BMS side. I had a partner asking me for an automate scripting thing, and we exchanged emails. I went home, write a script, and I gave him a step-by-step answers via email, and he was like, "Wow, you're awesome. This is the coolest thing ever." That's, again, one of the times where I'm obsessed with partner success. I love being able to help you guys. But also, a huge benefit for you in coming to one of our user groups is being able to network with people like you in your area, doing what you're doing with the products you're using to do it. The networking aspect of that, we can't speak highly enough. You can certainly go to our website and find out where user groups are coming to a city near you in the near future. I know I'm going to a couple. I know we've got like Philly, ConnectWise, Atlanta. There are a few others that I'm not remembering. Chicago, I think. So there's a few cities we're going to be coming to near you soon. Love to see you at our user groups. I know I'll be at least one of them, maybe two. And honestly, I've never met a partner who went to a user group who didn't come away from it saying that they got a lot out of it. It's really a fantastic experience. Love to see you there.